Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover Taurus Constellation, or Vrishabha Rashi, as it's known as in Sanskrit. And this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. All right, so let's take a look. Oh, note beforehand, if you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish, or my teaching videos, all my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk on one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that topic if you'd like to learn more. And my channel is all about playlists, so that I'm pretty good at organizing my videos into playlists so that different topics on the subject of Vedic astrology are easier to find. So, like, I have a constellations Rashi's playlist, which this will be a part of, a planets Graha's playlist, a houses Bhava's playlist, and there are others. So, there you go. If you'd like to learn astrology by looking at different famous birth charts, and this can be famous people, places, or moments in time, I would check out my Birth Chart Archive List 2024 video, where I list all the different famous charts I've looked at on this channel, analyzed on this channel, and the video you can find them in. So videos to watch before this one, with this one, to get more out of this talk, especially if you're a newbie. Introduction to the constellation of Rashis, constellation of Rashi categories, North, South, and East Indian style, plus Western charts. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Planet exaltation, debilitation, or Ucha Nicha. Planet friends and enemies, or Graha Mitra Shatru. Nakshatras or lunar mansions. The Lagna, also known as the Ascendant rising sign or first house. And symbolism of Venus or Shukra, because we are, Venus is ruled, or sorry, Vrishabha, Taurus is ruled by Venus. Okay, so just a note about constellations or Rashis from a Vedic astrology perspective. Constellations are based on fixed stars, so these are stars you can actually see with your eyes when you look up in the sky, assuming it's not cloudy or something, or there's too much air pollution. But a constellation is not the same as a sign. So if you're coming to this video from Western astrology, these are not exactly the same thing here. So what's the difference? Okay, so you see this diagram here, and you can see the different constellations as they're moving through the sky. It's like a little parade of them. You can see it's like a band of them. This is called the ecliptic. Okay, and so this ecliptic, shifts around the sun, Earth, both over the course of about a year. Now, it's not exactly a solar year. So what happens is every year there's a little bit of slippage, okay, and it's less than a degree. But over hundreds and thousands of years, there's more and more slippage between the ecliptic and our solar year. And so Western astrology is based on signs. So that's the kind of, I'd say, adaptive, kind of a constellation run adaptive to the solar calendar. Okay, so at this time, at the time of this recording, there's about a 23.5 degree difference between, for example, Taurus constellation and Taurus sign from Vedic astrology to Western astrology. Okay, so that's important to know. The other thing to know about constellations is that when you're looking at planets and you're looking at constellations, planets will be more influential than constellations. Okay. So the planets are considered to be like the actors, and the constellations are the stage. And not the stage, not that the stage is not important. It's just it's kind of a little bit more of a background issue. Okay. Or background influence. Yeah. So I think I gave the analogy maybe last time that, like, I went to this opera one time, and it was like a classic opera, hundreds of years old. But what was sort of interesting or unique about the opera was that the set, usually you would see these like European, very ornate costumes and that sort of thing, and makeup and all that sort of thing. But the costumes and set design were all very modern, like it was set in like a 1950s New York scene or something like that, even though it was a, classic European opera. So again, it's not, the constellations are not significant, but again, when we're assessing a house, we want to emphasize the planets more than the constellations. So keep that in mind as well. So let's get into Taurus now. Taurus is the second constellation of the zodiac. Again, Vrishabha Rashi, it's known as in Sanskrit. And Taurus is ruled by Venus, or Shukra. So just as a little bit of a reminder of Venus and what it represents, one, it's an emotional planet. And it can be a little bit kind of a little bit wavering sometimes, as emotions are. It can also be a little bit passive because it's also a Vata Kapha planet. So Vata and Kapha comes from Ayurveda, or traditional Indian medicine. And like Vata, you can loosely associate as the wind, and Kapha you can loosely associate as earth. And both of those elements are cold in nature. So as opposed to Pitta, which is a fire element, and fire element is very active and transformative. Okay. So, also, Venus is known for kindness and compassionate nature. It's a social planet. Creativity is associated with it, fertility, and it's also a rajasic planet. So, rajasic meaning that its kind of primary motivation is one of like building material worldly wealth and assets. Okay. Um, Taurus is a fixed earth sign or Shara Prithvi. So what does that mean? Any fixed sign means that it's like steady, like it doesn't change, it's not fickle. Okay. And an earth sign means that it's like very practical in nature, like very grounded. Okay. So when we have fixed earth here, you could think of things like farming, gardening, which is one of the things and places that Taurus represents in Vedic astrology. Okay. Also of note, like as a fixed earth sign, if you're depending on what you're assessing, with a birth chart, is that Taurus is associated with like the vegetable element as opposed to like minerals or animals, and also like semi-sentient beings. So again, like plants more than minerals, rocks more than like animals. And again, that kind of goes along with this fixed earth sign, and also the Vata Kapha. Like plants generally, are not as active as most animals, for example. Okay. So the symbol of Taurus is the bull. And so with the bull, you get strength, both physical and mental strength, which Taurus, especially Taurus rising folks, tend to have. Again, you have to assess all the different elements. Like again, you have to assess the planets in the house of Taurus and the planets aspecting the house of Taurus. And then you have to also assess the condition of Venus, because if Venus is toast, maybe it's debilitated and combust, then that would change things, right? So, but generally speaking, the other thing is like with bulls, they're generally slow to anger because again, fixed emotions. Like it's going to take them a while to like boil up. But the thing is, once they become angry, they're quite a formidable entity. Okay, so there's a lot of strength behind their emotions. Okay. So again, if they like you, they like you. But if they stop liking you, then look out, right? So the exaltation sign, or Taurus is the exaltation sign for the moon. So the moon is another planet representing emotion. So that's kind of doubled over in this sign or in this constellation. And moon also is related to imagination. So again, since Venus represents creativity and moon represents imagination, Taurus folks, Taurus, especially Taurus rising folks, can be quite creative. Now, Taurus is the debilitation sign for Rahu and Ketu. Rahu and Ketu are the north and south nodes of the moon, respectively. And they're the kind of curveball, monkey wrench planets. There's a hidden quality, unexpected quality, that sort of thing. And so that's sort of counter to the nature of Taurians, especially, or Taurus as a constellation. Okay, so what this all means is that Taurus folks are generally have strong emotions and they're good at creativity, but on the flip side, they may lack flexibility and they may have a hard time dealing with curveballs that life throws them. Okay. There are almost three nakshatras or lunar mansions in Taurus. So the first one is Kritika, and only one of four padas. So each nakshatra is divided into four padas or feet. I think it's translated as in Sanskrit. And the last one is in Vrishabha or Taurus. The first three are in Aries, the constellation before it. Okay. Oh, I should probably mention. So nakshatra or lunar mansion, there are 27 of them. So three, on average in each constellation. And the moon travels through one nakshatra approximately a night. After 27 nights, you get a lunar month. Okay. And each nakshatra is associated with different energy. Okay. So Kritika is associated with, it's kind of a dual nakshatra. The deity associated with Kritika is Kartikeya, who's the celestial or the chief commander in chief of the celestial army. So there's this fighting and this valiant, victorious, warrior. So there's that, and you would get more of that kind of energy in Aries because Aries is a movable fire sign, so a lot of action. And it's ruled by Mars, which is, the planet of like war and violence, and aggression. The other side of Kritika, or other kind of energy of Kritika, is this notion of like a foster mother, because Kartikeya was raised by several foster mothers. So we get this like nurturing, adopting kind of energy. And you would get more of that in Taurus because, again, what we're seeing already is that's the nature of Venus, which rules this constellation. Okay. Then the other two nakshatras, the next one is Rohini. Rohini is considered to be the most attractive, seductive, lovely nakshatra. Okay. So that again goes along with this vibe of Taurus of being like beautiful and gardening and flower and romance and love, all these things that Venus represents, but like in a grounded way. And then the last nakshatra is Mrigashirsha, which is ruled by, which is symbolized by a deer's head. And so there's a seeking, searching energy with Mrigashirsha, and you're starting to get some movement here. But since it's in a fixed earth sign, this would be like more practical, seeking more practical solutions, practical answers, practical things. Okay. Okay. So what else do we have? So on a little bit more of a personal level, so when we're looking at a Taurus constellation, whether it's the first house or another house, like um, can we kind of get from that? Yeah, what can we interpret from that? Well, it's the second constellation of the zodiac. So just being an even numbered constellation, it's going to bring more of a feminine type of energy. So again, you can think of things like nurturing, intuition, which we talked about with Venus and the moon. It's also more of like a passive type of energy. And the other thing is more of a receptive type of energy. Okay. So height-wise, again, you have to consider all the planets in and related to Taurus. But if somebody was a Taurus rising, then typically they would be more on the short side. Okay, but that's not always true. Again, bodily constitution, since they're a Earth sign, they tend to have Vata or a windy kind of a constitution or body. Again, that's from Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, if you're into that. And then body parts, face and throat. Okay. So that's also important. So, and we'll get into this. And then also, like next, on the next line, you see health. So, what are health related issues associated with the Vrishabha? Well, face and throat, and generally like EENT, like ears, eyes, nose, throat, because that kind of covers all that. Eyes, sight, vocalization, speaking, choking, goiter, or other thyroid issues, being inflexible of mind or body, because again, it's a fixed earth sign. Overeating potentially, because Venus is like the planet of like luxury and indulgence and finer things of life. So, and also because they're a rajasic sign, so they're interested in building material things. That's kind of the plane. And also Venus is like the worldly counselor. So they can be quite like, they can, not always, be quite materialistic or at least very practical, even if they're very spiritual as well. They might have trouble swallowing. So again, you can see all these ears, nose, throat things going on here. In terms of, you know, potential for having children, Taurus is considered to be a semi-fruitful sign or constellation. Okay, so so uh, they may have children, but they typically don't have a lot. Again, you have to assess the fifth house, which represents children, and Jupiter, which is the planet, the Bhavakarka or planet um, representing children as well. But so at least Taurus is kind of maybe yes, maybe no as far as children goes. Okay, at least just from that, just from Taurus. But then you got to figure out, add in all these other elements to figure out what the direction is for a particular individual. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit in some of the slides. So what if you actually have Taurus or Vrishabha in the Lagna? So the Lagna is the ascendant rising sign of first house. So how would we know if we have a chart that's a Taurus rising or Lagna? Well, you can see the kind of a mock-up here of a chart on the right. This is a North Indian style chart. That's what I use in my work. And the rising sign is this top diamond in the middle. Okay. Now you would know it's a Taurus rising because in the bottom corner you'll have a number. And if that bottom corner number is a 2, that means Taurus, the second constellation of zodiac, is in the Lagna, ascendant, rising sign, first house. All different names for the same thing. Okay. So, so there will be some general things that you might consider. Again, you have to take this in the context of the whole chart, okay? But just as a first pass, like if you knew nothing else, all you know is that this is a Taurus rising person, then these are the things you might start thinking about, okay? So Venus, since Venus is the ruling planet for Taurus, Venus is exalted in the 11th house of like income. Okay, and since we know Venus is, materialistic sign and interested in kind of because it's a fixed Earth sign, right? I mean, it's interested in worldly things. Also, the 11th house is a Kamastana, so house of pleasure, and Venus represents things like romance and relationships and the finer things of life and creativity. So, a lot of nice stuff. So, this is the wheelhouse. This 11th house is a wheelhouse for Venus. So again, we're getting focus on material gains and pleasure here. Okay. Then Venus is debilitated in the 5th house of Virgo or Kanya, but it is a friend sign because Mercury owns it. Mercury owns Virgo. So, what would this potentially mean? Well, Venus, Taurus rising people, Taurus Lagna people, usually have an interest in finance. Okay. Or again, wealth building of some kind. Also, like accounting might be their thing because Virgo is very much like an accounting, like literally almost a bean counter type of energy. Also, writing because Mercury represents writing. Um, this might be, again, an indication of few kids, because Taurus on its own is a semi fruitful Lugna, but then the 5th house is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury generally is not hugely indicative of having children. Okay. Um, but they would, be fairly sharp. Um, but there might be kind of a duality to their intellect. Like they might waver a bit because Virgo is a dual sign. Now, Mercury, I mentioned, owns the 5th house where Venus is debilitated, but also owns a 2nd house, which indicates, which represents family, speech, um, family and speech, and then the kids and counseling part comes from the 5th house. Okay. So again, Mercury is a friend or mitra to Venus. So even though Venus is debilitated in Virgo in the 5th house, so again, the kids and counseling bit, family and speech will be usually pretty strong for this person. Okay. The Taurus rising person. Then Moon is an enemy sign and it rules the 3rd house. And the 3rd house represents siblings, so there could be issues with siblings. Sun is also another enemy sign for Venus, and it rules the 4th house, which represents mom and also family line. Okay. So it's kind of interesting, somewhat contradictory, it seems, that Venus is like the socializing planet yet, and people who are close to them, there can be issues here, like siblings, mom, that sort of thing. Um, then what else? So Mars is a neutral sign to Venus, and it rules the 7th house and the 12th house. So the 7th house is like spouse and independent business, and the 12th house is the house of loss and expenditures. So the thing is that since the Mars rules the house 12 from the Lugna, um, that means that there's like a kind of a negation factor of Mars to Venus. Okay, in terms of the Lugna here. So, and usually, again, I think it happens in it's true in Western astrology as well. I mean, you generally want Venus and Mars to line up in a nice way so that this brings harmony to like spouse-like partner, marriage type relationships. And so there can be like a drain here potentially in personal relationships for a Taurus person. The other thing is that if we look at the seventh house here is ruled by Mars, and the 12th house from the seventh is ruled by Venus. So you can see that like Mars owns the 12th house from the Lagna, and Venus owns the 12th house from the seventh house. So again, the relationship between Mars and Venus is a bit at odds to a harmonious relationship. So there might be relationship issues, not always. I mean, it's not like Taurus people never get married, right? I mean, so and stay married and are happily married. Again, you have to assess everything in the chart, but there can be issues. Um, Jupiter rules the 8th and the 11th house. So the 11th house I already talked about, but the 8th house, that's the house of long-term troubles and that sort of thing. And so when Jupiter owns both of those things, this Taurus rising person, Taurus Lagna person, can have difficulties with older siblings. So we saw in the third house, which is ruled by the moon, which is enemy to Venus, there were siblings, younger siblings, possibly gods. And the 11th house also represents friends and coworkers. So again, it's a little bit contradictory that Venus, the socializing planet, seems to have quite a few relationship issues in their chart. Okay, now that, some people might see it as, well, they're stubborn, right? Because they're a fixed earth sign or whatever. But you can see that it's like deeper than that. It's like house by house you go through, and there can be issues, right? So Saturn is a friend to Venus, and Saturn rules the ninth and the 10th house. So the ninth house is higher education and knowledge, and the 10th house is profession. So since Saturn's a friend, those are usually fairly good, at least as a template. Pretty good houses for Taurus, the rising person. And then the other one, I didn't left to the end here, is that Venus rules the sixth house. So the sixth house represents things like food, diet, daily habits. So this is its own sign. This is a strong sign for Taurus. So somebody, a Taurus rising person, might have very indulgent, like, daily habits. It's like maybe they're into cooking, maybe they overeat, maybe they're a gourmet cook. Um, maybe they're more interested in creativity than like exercising, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Or maybe they go to art galleries or something like that. So, um, yeah, and the sixth house also represents like acute issues as well as enemies. So, again, those can be strong in the Taurus rising person's life, depending again on the rest of the chart. So, if we look into Shastra, which is classical text about Vedic astrology, there's two here. I just picked up, some of the descriptions of a Taurus rising person, just to see what they have to say. So the first Shastra classic text is the Brihat Parashara Hora, chapter 4, and it says that they will have a white complexion. They will be long, I think meaning tall here. Be strong at night and rajasic. So rajasic I've already mentioned, and rajasic again is like more of a material focus and goal orientation, like worldly type of orientation to life. Strong at night, this sounds kind of funny, but the reason why probably strong at night is that Venus is the brightest planet in the sky, typically. And the other thing is that like Moon is exalted in Taurus, and Moon is one of the great luminaries, right? Because it's Sun, Sun, Moon, and then Venus, and Venus and Moon are the brightest and kind of items in the sky at night. So long. This is a little bit contradictory. I'm not sure because, like I already told you, short. So this sounds contradictory. Um, the other thing, white complexion. So again, this could be like pale, generally speaking, and this again could be because Vata and Kapha, the Vata Kapha nature, right? So if we go back to the Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, Vata has a bit of a When somebody's really Vata, they have like a bit of a gray tinge to them, and people who are very Kapha have a whitish tinge to them. And people who have a Pitta constitution or fire constitution have like red, sometimes very red skin, like flushed skin and that sort of thing. So since this is we're a Vata Kapha background, they would tend towards being like less red and more white or pale. Then from the Phaladipika, chapter 9, this is the newer, Shastra classical text, not as old as the Brihad Parasharahora. So, and this is not my language, okay? I would not write this myself. But plumpy thighs and big face, okay? So you can see some of this like roundness here of different body parts, especially the face, because Taurus rising, the first house represents the face and the head, Then agricultural ventures. We could be interested in agricultural ventures, which again, we talked about cultivating things, planting things, creativity, but ventures here. So like maybe specifically selling, the things that they grow. It's not like, they're just, I don't know, maybe digging in the backyard or something for their own pleasure, which it could be, but, we're looking at kind of a bigger endeavor here. Happy in middle and last portions of life. I don't know why this is here, but it's part of the list, so I'm adding it, just giving you the full thing that it states in the Phaladipika. Fond of enjoying relations. Well, this is not surprising, right? Romance, I'm guessing sex. I don't know exactly. They didn't, specify, but I'm guessing that's what's going on. Because when we're talking about Venus, Venus is the planet of like romance and love and again, socializing. So despite the apparent relationship issues here. Also sacrificing and forgiving. So again, this kind of gets back to the more passive nature of Taurus, as long as you don't get their ire up. Again, the kind of, they're not like aggressive by nature, but when you finally cross the line with them, they might turn on you, but for the most part, they're fairly loyal folks, and enduring hardship. So again, this is their kind of stuck or fixed nature, is that, they'll just keep going, like sort of plowing through things, I mean, they don't really change course typically. Um, it says possess cattle. What does that mean? Well, sometimes cattle are vehicles. A lot of times cattle, especially if we're talking about like ancient Indian culture, cattle were considered assets. So vehicles and assets, well, Venus is the planet representing vehicles, and again, assets. We keep talking about the sort of material wealth building predisposition of Taurus Lagna people. And then, this might sound, this seemed like a lark, but it's on the list, so I'm giving it to you as well. Marks or moles on the back, face, or sides of the body. So face, I get back, not sure, and sides, not sure about that. The other thing is, like, I was wondering, these marks and moles, like maybe these are beauty marks, which kind of makes sense for a Venus-ruled rising sign. So there you go. Faster classical text. Let's see their 2 cents about this. Then if we think about like environmental kind of symbolism of Taurus or Vrishabha. So first of all, the method of rising is a back rising or Prishtadaya method. So what does that mean? So when the bull, when the Taurus sign rises in the east, you'll see the hind end of the bull before you see the front end and horns. Okay. So because the different symbols of the different zodiac signs, when you get the head coming up first over the horizon, that's a head rising situation. And a head rising situation is considered auspicious. Back rising situation means it's inauspicious. So what that means is if there are natural benefic planets and Taurus, that can dim their beneficence a bit. If there are natural malefics in Taurus, it can actually increase their level and quality. Now, this is not something I typically look at, but again, if you're looking at a situation, or you're looking at a horoscope and you can't decide because it's like there are factors on one side, factors on the other side, and you need some sort of like decisive, like final deciding thing to give like a yes or no answer, maybe this is something you would consider. It's usually not a first thing, but then direction related to Vrishabha is the south. The element related to Taurus is the earth, which we've mentioned. Now, places. So when you see Taurus, field, meadows. I mean, that's not too surprising based on what we've talked about so far. In the Brihat Parashara Hora, it does mention village, which I put a question mark here because in other information I've always seen village associated with Gemini. So, just be aware of that. Village for Gemini has worked pretty well for me. But maybe, if I think about village and forest in the future, maybe that'll help me also. I don't know. So anyway, question mark there. But again, agricultural land, farming land, lawns, like cultivated, little property, right? This is all Taurus type land stuff here, property. Dim rooms with low ceilings. I don't know why, but that's there. Barns, closets, basements, storerooms. See, the other thing is here, like barns, closets, basements, storeroom. One, barns has big animals like cows and bulls and horses there. But also like barns, closets, storerooms, basements. These are usually places where there's not a lot of action, like it's storage and holding of things. Kind of like this fixed earth nature of Taurus. I mean, usually these aren't like as a counter example, like Mercury, like Gemini especially, like you tend to get like it's like places of crossroads and stuff like that where people like an airport or something because people are coming and going in different directions, which is more of a Gemini type energy. So you can see like, all of these things on this list, essentially, some of them are just sort of, I don't know why they're on the list, but I'm giving you the full list that I have. They're areas where you nurture things, like plants, or they're sort of stagnant and you store things. So what else do we have here? Southeast wall. I think that's because southeast is represented by a Venus. Not sure. And Vastu. Vastu is like a feng shui, but from Indian culture instead of Chinese culture. And then ground or below ground level. So again, this has to do with like earth. Yeah. So there you go. So like this lady cultivating looks like geraniums or something, some sort of flower. This is all very Taurus-like. Okay, so there you go. Taurus Vrishabha Rashi. Thanks again for all your support of the channel. Thanks for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. All the different ways you guys support the channel. Liking, subscribing, asking questions and comments and donations sent in and all that. Thank you for all of that. I appreciate it. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. If you like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2024 video for a list of all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel. I do offer personal birth chart readings. I do those live on Zoom, on Skype, and as pre-recorded video. So if that's interesting to you, you can contact heartlightastro@yahoo.com. Email me there for more info on that. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too if that's helpful to you. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.